I want to talk about Candace. She did it. Candace is popping, honey. What? She get more views than all the goddamn networks put together. So she had,
She's a very great person. She is one of the most gracious people I've ever encountered. And she takes her position and uses it for a constructive purpose.
yes, and I was listening to it today and I caught this part. And of course, people on X clipped it where she said, maybe it was weeks or days, but recently leading up to Charlie Kirk's assassination, he was basically threatened or trying to have his arm twisted to verbally, publicly come out in support of Israel. And we all know how Candace Owens felt about Netanyahu, and I share those same sentiments about Netanyahu. So I want to play this clip from what she said.
In the Hamptons, and he had more than one event, but he had essentially what was staged, an intervention was staged by Bill Ackman, because Charlie's rational thoughts about Israel were a no-no. This is not the route that you should be going on. And Charlie was surrounded by his friends, his quote unquote friends. Bill Ackman was very upset, and threats were made. That is what I am told, and I will tell you that I am very happy for Bill Ackman to dispute this narrative. In fact, he was asked to dispute this narrative. Max Blumenthal went out to him today, and Bill Ackman came back and said, I have receipts I can show you. And he did not provide the receipts. This is not how it went down. I know it went down this way. I'm waiting for one of them to go on record and to say that it didn't go down this way. It was at this time that Bibi Netanyahu was called and Charlie was invited to Israel. This was an under duress situation, I would say, because I've been in these situations before. When I started asking very sensible questions about Israel, as someone who had dedicated her political life to supporting Israel, many times alongside Charlie Kirk, I was met with the very same pressure. And just like Charlie was being invited to Israel, I was invited somewhere else. And when this arrived to me, it felt like a threat. I got to tell you that. It felt like a threat, like not like, hey, come here and we can educate you because you're my friend. More like, this is your last chance. That's how it felt to me. I can't speak to how it felt to Charlie. And I know that Charlie was offered a ton of money in this moment. A ton of money. Bibi would fund it, spend tons of money. And Turning Point, I guess, if it needed to go to a higher level, would have gone to an even higher level than it already was at. And I know for a fact that Charlie denied that funding. That Charlie denied, and what Bibi didn't include there, he declined to go to Israel for, I would describe this as like, re-education camp. We've seen it. You made an uh-oh, but we can help you. We just need you to come out to Auschwitz and take a picture. Yeah. We just need you to come to the Holocaust Museum and take a photo. We just need you to go to Israel and we can make this better. Charlie said no to Bibi. Okay. Bill Ackman, if you would like to dispute that, I would love to hear what you say happened, because our sources and what we have, it's solid. Okay. There were conversations that took place, messages that were sent at that time, and they are solid. So I decided, another person that was there, and I am not surprised this person was there. If you've been listening to my show, Seth Dillon, I was going to talk to Seth Dillon, and I decided to message him last night about this Hamptons meeting. And Seth Dillon, who is normally very quick with a response, has not yet been able to respond. I'll show you this text message chain. And I want to be clear, I am not someone who normally publicizes text messages. But my friend was shot in the neck. And I'm just not really in the state right now to be polite when it comes to the answers that I am demanding, okay? This is me out to Seth Dillon last night. I sent him Bill Ackman's tweets because, he tweeted, I feel incredibly privileged to have spent a day and shared a meal with Charlie Kirk this summer. He was a giant of a man. I said, any comment on this one, Seth? He didn't answer last night. This morning I said, need a comment ASAP, please. He didn't answer. Then I followed that up and I said, trying again here, you were present when Ackman lost his mind on Charlie and when Bibi invited him to Israel and Charlie refused. Text messages immediately following this meeting are circulating. I find Ackman's statement, as though the meeting was somehow cordial, to be incredibly disturbing. Are you at all disturbed by that tweet? Do you feel, as I do, that this tweet significantly betrays the defined purpose and mood of his, and I presume your, final meeting with Charlie Kirk? ? He was unable to speak to me, but he did place some frantic calls to Turning Point USA. Yeah. You see, I went out to Seth, but I also went out to two other people who were at this meeting, and nobody is willing to go on record. They're all messaging each other, trying to figure out a coordinated response to say that, no, this was all quite cordial, but no one wants to go on record and describe it as cordial because they know someone's leaking, because someone's got a guilty conscience about what happened at the Hamptons. So I will again put it out there, Seth, Bill Ackman, and to the other individuals who I have not yet named, but who are going to be named later this week, who were at the Hamptons when Charlie was put under pressure, when Bibi Netanyahu called him and invited him to Israel, again, in a move that when it happened to me, and it wasn't Bibi Netanyahu, felt to me like a laced threat. I am inviting you guys, I will give you my platform, actually, to come clear matters up, to tell us what really happened. Because, I think Charlie was definitely on the brink of changing some of his perspectives. And I can tell you factually, Charlie was praying the rosary. Charlie was going to mass. One of my last conversations with Charlie was me joking with him saying, just make the last step, okay? You are, I said specifically, you're too smart to be a Protestant. Just take the last step, Charlie. He says, ha ha. He was speaking about Mary. And typically when those steps start taking place, you stop referring to yourself, as I did, as a Judeo-Christian. Again, it is
Okay, that was the end of that. So I want to say this real quick. Please protect Candace Owens by all means, her husband, her bodyguards, because I love the fact that she goes hard on Netanyahu, and all those government officials in Israel. And that was her friend, and so I believe her. What happened in the Hamptons? What is your take?
Growing up,
What?
both of them in their early 30s. Sometimes when you had people that you knew well, spoke with, and they've died as a result of their political or social engagements, get a different perspective. One of the main problems is that when you deal with Israel, it's kind of an interesting situation because you have in the shadows the Mossad. And under Israeli law, the Mossad has legal authority to carry out assassinations as part of the legal diplomatic process of Israel. It's one of the few mainstream countries that has that. It's not that the rest of them don't, but it's not approved under the law. Like in the United States, CIA does occasionally take somebody out or have somebody taken out, but it's against the law. So you can't claim credit for it, but the Mossad can. And the other thing that's interesting, Netanyahu claims to be an atheist. He's Jewish, but he's a Jew atheist. So, he's of a culture without being a devout believer in the religion. So it's an interesting juxtaposition that sometimes people don't get. And Netanyahu is a very ruthless individual. She's playing a very interesting line. Her father in law holds a position within English governance that has to be neutral on this. And I suspect he probably approves of what he's doing, even though he can't do this openly himself.
Well, her father-in-law openly said he does not agree with some of the things she has said before in the past. But yeah, he can't openly say he does agree. So
her father-in-law has a position within English governance. He's an earl, which is as high under the aristocratic pantheon as somebody can get in English society without being close to being a direct relative of the royal family. It goes king or queen, prince, princess, and then duke and earl are on the same level. Duke if you're part of the royal family, earl if you're a commoner who's risen that high. So her father-in-law is an English earl, which is interesting.
yeah, well, her assessment, of what took asking a question of what took place in the Hamptons, um, that's that's a good theory that could actually be a fact. That's a strong possibility that could have happened. And it's probably no coincidence to, that looking at the aftermath of it. So,
well, let me just interject this. If your father-in-law was the Senate Majority Leader for the United States Senate and held that position not just because he was elected to a 6-year term, but held it essentially because of appointment in effect for life, how much information could you be privy to that you could do something with?
I mean, technically, you're not supposed to be privy to that information,
Well,
but
yeah, you can. See, England says because of your bloodlines, because of your social and cultural relationships, you have the absolute authority. See, it's not somebody runs something, say, if he's head of the Admiralty, where it's like he's Secretary of the Navy. Because he is First Lord of the Admiralty, has the absolute discretion to run it as he sees fit, as though he were a medieval baron who was running something. You see, when his lordship presides over a court in England, that is like, stop that. That is quite a bit different than being a judge on a comparable level in the United States. You hold a different position, which not so much is because you are elected to something or appointed to something. It's because of your bloodlines and the connections that have been established that you have that position, so you can move.
put them damn dogs in the back.
Stop that. Hey, ladies, be quiet. So what happens is
tell
that,
them bitches to shut up.
in other words, quiet, and you settle down. Settle down.
You got 2 bitches in your house.
Yeah, that's technically correct. Now, what happens, see, is that you have a situation.
Well, they saying pet the puppy. Pick up the little one.
Yeah, I did. Now, what goes on is this. Imagine a sorority or a fraternity, and you can be in this fraternity or sorority, and you're in there for life. And at one point, you might have been dean of pledges. At one point, you might have been uh, correspondence secretary. At another point, you might be something. So your position does not come to you because you held this particular office within the fraternity or sorority. Your position comes because you belong to the fraternity or sorority. Now, supposing this organization was something you were born into or you got appointed into for life because of outstanding excellence. In other words, you got knighted on the battlefield, so to speak, because you were a great warrior. And they decided to bring you in on board with the nobility.
Mhm.
That's what goes on in England, where you hold these positions not because they are elected or appointed to positions. That's not where you get your authority. You get your authority because of your status in society,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
which is one of the reasons the Americans rebelled against English governance way back in 1775, 76.
So in other words, you're saying she's kind of insulated with protection. How so? She kind of has some type of leeway to say what she's saying. But even if
But
she,
not quite,
but
because
but what is wrong
there
with
is
what
a
she's
real
saying though?
thing with
No. But here's the thing: what is wrong with what she's saying? Why?
nothing wrong with it.
Nothing is wrong with it. But why are some people so? Oh my God! Look what she's saying. She better
Because
be
they're
careful.
not used to it, because they're in America and they have to deal with political opinion, the press, and getting bad mouth. And see, they don't have a dignity over here that they have in England. You know what that is?
What?
You hold the position. The position has nothing to do with your authoritative status. That's yours for life. But if you are held to not have confidence, you resign. You see, in England, somebody says, I'm going to resign if I don't get my way. And the threat of the resignation gets them their way because they have such status, credibility status as individuals based on their individual standing in society, that nobody else can afford to have them say, hey, I will have no part of this, because it discredits you. We
Mhm.
don't have that kind of thing over here.
Right. Well, guys, can you guys please hit that like button? Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Share this video, share. People on X, repost. A couple more things, but before we move on, I do want to highlight this super chat. Thank you, D. Grant says, Judge Joe, how do you feel about the liberal black leadership? I feel they have went to a new low over Charlie Kirk compared to George Floyd, who is viewed as a martyr.
Yeah, it's true. See, the bunch you have is not really leadership. They're pimps. They're put in a position of figurehead status by the Democratic Party and the far left. So what winds up happening is they have to sing for their supper, and they do. They don't contribute much to the advancement of the people they look like. They don't contribute much to America. They're just basically hustlers. If they were preachers, they'd be pulpit pimps, and they're useless. Like, look at Al Sharpton. What has he done except recklessly run his mouth off over the last 35 years after courting around with James Brown back when? I
Yeah.
mean, what has he done? Nothing. He starts itching when he can't hold hands on opposite sides and starts singing "We Shall Overcome." And that doesn't do anything now. That's been out of the window for the last half century. So what does he do? He's propped up with low ratings because he advances the cause. He sounds like he hasn't an education. I'm interested to find out what kind of pulpit he actually has, because it doesn't appear to have any, though he was made a preacher supposedly, what, 8 years old? And that's bogus. You can't be a preacher at 8 years old because you don't know anything about life. And if you don't know anything about life, you have no business trying to preach to somebody. So, I mean, it's just fake, straight up and down. And he's a plantation showpiece.